talk about the third 6 weeks data. And so we are going to do our PLC on the data that most of us have finished. Some of our kids are not all the way finished, but this is where we're at. So some review of the norms. We're going to start and end on time. We're going to limit sidebar conversations, including cell phone and email. Make sure that you're being clear. Don't take things personally. If you don't speak up and say that you don't agree, we're going to take it as that you do agree. Make sure everyone pulls their own weight. Be vulnerable. Let's solve problems, not revolve around them. And then what happens here, for the most part, stays here.
Does our names need to be added to that?
Yes.
Okay.
So our team goal for the year is long division, which is 4.4H. And so I have the data for the kids that have finished the test so far. And this is what it looks like right now. So Autry, you have 15 kids finished. I'm at 30, which I have about 9 more students that need to finish. Miller's on here. Ramsey's at 29 students, and Starnes is at 33 finished. So this is what our data looks like. I'll go ahead and go to the back end of it. So right here is our percentage scores. So Autry, right now you're at 75%, or your kiddos are. Mine are at 66. Miller's at 60. Ramsey's 57, and Starnes, you're at 63.
I'm sure mine are going to drop quite a bit whenever my lower class gets their scores in there.
Yes, and that's what ended up happening. That's what ended up happening with mine too. I was sitting at 70-something%. So some positives are 4.4C, which is the standard representing the product. So it's the question that they had to pick. I think it was 19 times 19. And the students did really well with that. Another positive, which is one of our essential standards, was 4.3B, which you can see here. We're in everyone's above 70% for the most part. And that is decomposing fractions in more than one way. So I was really impressed with that. I know we just tested over that the week before, but I was impressed that they did well with fractions. Another positive is 4.2F, which everyone is above 80% besides SPED, and that's comparing and ordering decimals. Is that the strengths that you guys are seeing?
Yes, I am.
Yes, ma'am.
And the fractions as well.
Yeah, I printed off I went to each of my students when they got done, printed off their personal sheet, so that once we're done, I can look at it and kind of show the kids what they know, what they don't, what we need to work on.
Yeah.
And I'm also going to send it home with their parents. So the parents have an idea.
Is there anywhere you want me to type those in on the PLC document? Because I don't see anywhere.
I don't think there's a positive section, but I just wanted to bring attention to some good things that our kids were doing. So looking at the things
we appreciate that.
So looking at the things that they are struggling in, there were 3 standards that really they did pretty bad on. And that was 4.2B, which if you look, 4.2B here, in the 50s, 60s, and 40s. And that is dot plot and frequency. And that is the problem where I believe, let me make sure.
4.2B?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. 4.2 is represent numbers with decimals using expanded notation.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
And it's an essential standard and it's a readiness standard. So that's definitely one where Ms. Ramsey pointed out that in the study guide, there were no questions or in the review, there were no questions over it, but in the test there was, I believe, two questions.
Yeah, there were several questions I thought had that same thing that we did not at all hit on that review, and I'm like, oh geez.
Yes.
Yeah, there were two. There were two of that one.
Yes. And so when we look at that in relation to STAR, there are a lot of expanded notation questions. Every year there's at least 2 questions, and most of them are for that standard, and most of them are on expanded notation.
I noticed my students are struggling on the questions that they give you the clues. Like they'll say this, you know, those expanded notations, and they just want to put those 3 numbers together. Even though I've gone over that, this is just the clues. That doesn't mean it's just that number. You know, that's just part of the number. It's like they still don't get it. So
I told my kids you need to draw a place value chart out. So you need to find where your highest number is and your lowest number, and that's how many place value lines you need to have.
Right.
I still had kids who couldn't do it. Still had kids that couldn't figure that one out. So yeah, and that's always been a struggle in all the years.
It's confusing, but we just need to do more practice, and I'll have to put those in at intervention time.
So, Ms. Ramsey, that is something we need to add to the bottom. Is we need to find more questions like number 6 on the test.
Okay.
But I would agree. My students were also. I only have 3 numbers, so I'm going to pick the one that only has 3 numbers. And I'm like, that has nothing to do with what we're doing. So.
And what's crazy is I told my kids that y'all, the first few questions are all place values. So you need to have place value charts.
Yes.
You know, draw them out, little mini ones. And that's all. That's the only thing I gave them. I said, place value or place, that's what you do. They still just.
So unfortunately, 4.6D was also a huge struggle, and most of us, Mr. Miller's at 66%, so whoop whoop for SPED, but the rest of us are below 33. And that standard is classifying 2-dimensional figures. And there were 2 questions on the test. The first was it gave a description of the shapes, and you had to pick what shape it could have been. And then the second was what description of these polygons fits.
Oh, yeah.
So last PLC.
I drill that all the time.
Last PLC, we talked about this standard. I think we're going to have to hit it more in intervention again because they're still struggling with it. And when I went and looked at relation to STAR, there were lots of, here's a shape, here's shapes. What description fits these shapes?
There are a lot of those.
I think it's a lot of vocabulary that our kids are still struggling with. So we need to brainstorm.
Well, the countdown to STAR, that has a lot of vocabulary in there, even though the questions per se aren't so as challenging as we see on our Sharon Wells, but the amount of they use like the word produce or product, they use a lot of those vocabulary. They use polygons. They don't say shapes. They say polygons or so. And I think that's probably one reason why in the past my kids have done fairly well is because I've always used that part of my prep. And it is vocabulary embedded. And I think by us starting to do that part as our basic facts will be, I think we'll start seeing better results on that, hopefully.
I would agree. And I think some targeted interventions for the students who are bringing that down because it is an essential standard and it is a readiness standard. So the other standard that we struggled with is the last standard here. And most of us were in the 20s. And so that standard is using 1 to 2 step problems with dot plot frequency charts that have decimals or fractions. And so that is question 28. And that question we pulled directly from the STAR questions.
What's the standard, please?
it is 4.9B.
Okay, thank you.
And that is the question where there was a tally chart, and I believe chicken was missing, and it said that chicken, what?
Hamburger was hamburger was missing.
And you had to, it was half of chicken, and then you had to either add or subtract.
Yeah, it was half of pizza, and then you had to add chicken.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
Oh.
I didn't even pay attention. And when I worked my test,
Mm-hmm.
I was paying attention. I just thought I chose hamburger. I didn't even see chicken.
So
A lot of my kids put the answer 13, which is just if you have hamburger or half pizza to get hamburger. A lot of them didn't do the second step, which was to add chicken to it, because in the question it says how many kids chose chicken or hamburger.
Right.
So I am seeing that same problem across the board when they use the word or instead of the word and.
Yes.
Are y'all seeing that too?
Yes, I am. That's what I think, because I had kids raise their hand, ask me that same thing. If they're saying or, which they were like, how do I know which answer to put?
Right.
The chicken or the hamburger?
Right. So when I looked at the star stats for 4.9B, that was the only question that was not stem and leaf plot. So there were 4 questions, one from each year, and we chose the one from 2016. And then the other 3 questions were stem and leaf, which we haven't taught yet.
Okay.
Well, what's crazy is for some reason, in the past, it seems like they would understand stem and leaf. They understood these better. The last 2 years, they're struggling with some of those questions. And I'm like, I never noticed them to have that struggle to last year we didn't take it. But
right.
I think if you're looking at the basic dot plot questions that they're usually asked, like the other one that's in the problem where it had them add the dots on 8 and 9, they did fine on that.
Yes. So
it was a 1-step problem. I think it has to do with the fact that it was 2 steps.
Yes. So the 2 dot plot questions that were on there were question 28 or 29 and 30. And that was standard 4.9A. And as you can see on the results, Autry, your kids were at 100%. Your 15 students were at 100% there. And so all of our students,
what question was that?
29 and 30 were the dot plot, the ones that you were talking about.
One of them was you just added how many dots were on 8 and 9.
Yeah.
And the other, you had to pick the correct dot plot.
Yeah, you should have picked it.
Well, if they would have had 8 or more, my kids would have bombed it. They don't get or more and more, you know what I'm saying, or less. They just want to do, but because they said 8 and 9, they told them specifically what to look at. That's the only reason why I think my kids did well. Because when we were doing the other ones, I was getting really frustrated. I'm like, y'all, it says 8 or more. What is 8 or more? Tell me those numbers out loud. Write those numbers down. So thank God they did something positive there, but it's not going to be like that on the test.
Right. So it's sounding like our students are struggling with the or part of either 1-step problems or multiple step problems. So that definitely is something that we need to start really attacking, both in our content instruction and interventions. One more thing I wanted to bring focus to was 4.4H, which is the TEK that we chose. We did choose long division for 70% mastery, but that is TEK 4.4H. And though the test didn't have any long division because they were all multiplication, 2-digit by 2-digit multiplication, our students did decent on. And so when I averaged 4.4H together, we're at 66.7%, which is almost 70%. But again, that was 2-digit by 2-digit, which I was still impressed with because some of my students are still struggling with that concept.
Is there any way, like, I feel my kids personally, I feel like I need to switch from division to multiplication as my like focus teak for my class. I don't know how y'all feel about that. If your kids have gotten division from us, like drilling it and using it as our focus teak, are they doing a lot better on division than they are double-digit multiplication at this point?
I mean, maybe you can just, we can keep the division as a whole, and then you can have your own class. And
That's what I planned on doing, but I was just making sure that none of y'all needed the same thing
No,
using.
I
so
mean, a lot of my students,
add that to it.
a lot of mine have it down, doing the standard algorithm. They can do it, but there's still several that cannot. That they still have to use the window pane.
Yeah. So I have both that struggle in division and multiplication. And I think that is fine for us to kind of focus on, especially because it all falls under 4.4H, which is the Boulder Peak that we chose. So I do believe we needed to reintroduce or start talking more about shapes and kind of hit that expanded notation, because those were both standards that we were low in, and both of those are essential standards. So,
but that's a good idea, Emily.
Okay.
I think that's a good idea, because I keep an intervention in my Google Classroom. I keep, like, you know how we do the daily slide. I have my daily work, but then I have an intervention topic. So during intervention time, I put my work in there that the kids go to if they're not working with me or they're not doing redos or whatever. They know to go into that intervention and pull. There's long division and there's multiplication in there. That's what I put in there.
What if we made our own like countdown to star thing that had these 3 teaks, multiplication and division, and we did them for like we did 1 page a day for like, I don't know, a couple weeks, and see if that improves what we're doing.
You know what? I have this sheet. I bought it a while ago, and let me look at it. But it had like a number of the day, and they had to write it like in expanded notation. They had to write expanded.
Yes. I know what you're talking about, Kara.
is it Mountain Math?
No, it's called Twisted Tornado or something.
Mm-hmm. We used it last year, and that was a really good tool.
And before we had, well, I think I used it not last year, but the year before last, I think.
Oh, I remember.
But maybe I used it here and there. I'm looking for my math real quick. It's basically
like the number of the day, and then you just do stuff.
Yes, but then from there you build problem solving, there's all kinds. Something I bought a long time ago, several years ago, because I saw it when I was at camp. Someone was talking about it, and I pulled it up. It's called the Texas Tornadoes. And they do daily spiral reviews. They're broken into, I think, 6-week parts. But like every day you go over a problem of the day, but then they also have like countdown to star style questions. They're called spiral reviews. I'm trying to find the number of the day stuff.
Okay. So we can use, you're going to find the Teaks Texas Tornadoes. Miss Ramsey suggested, teacher created.
Let me show you real quick. Do you want me to?
Yes, I will.
Okay, y'all.
Stop sharing.
All right, I'll try to present. Okay, I'll do this real quick.
Thank you, Ms. Ramsey.
You're welcome.
Hey, while Audrey's looking for that, Gabbard, you told us 4.9B, and then you said it was question 28. What can you tell me the description of that 4.9B again?
It's a tally chart with a missing number.
Like the frequency table?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, here's one of them. So they have like spiral reviews. I'll share all of this out to you. But they have like, this is like a spiral review. And they're looking at different things. And then you go down here to where you have a number of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end, they would have to write it, which we don't have to do all those parts, but then they have to build it. And by place by expanded notation. And so it goes all the way. This one that doesn't particularly have the tenths and hundredths, but they do have them with that.
Okay, that was
But here's one.
Okay.
Notation. You have to build it. You have to plot it. You may not want every aspect of all of these, but there may be certain parts that we can do. Like here, they have to compare it. They have to write it in words. I mean, write it in words to me, it just depends. But my problem I have, some of my kids are like, and one of the problems they didn't know how to put it. They're like, I don't get this. I went, well, you need to put a place value chart, and it's because they gave it to him and in words. And I'm like, well, build what it says on a place value chart. Huh? I went, write it with numbers.
Well, I think that to use your intervention, even for the virtual students, because they can pull that up and then they can just do it on their own notebook paper.
Right.
Yeah. But this right here has this one right here refers back to third grade, that first 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. So you may want to go further into it. But I can share this right here out with everyone.
And I think that would be a good start, especially to start hitting those standards. Are you guys doing morning work? Do you guys give morning work?
My kids they have to work on their countdown to star as their morning work.
Mm-hmm. Or basic
facts. Come in. Oh, here, let me stop sharing real quick, and then I'll share that with y'all. Or stop presenting. I'll share that with y'all. I'll just share that folder with y'all. It has it, and that way y'all can look through it. You can decide. The further you go in the 6 weeks, the later in the year it is. So you may find more that's suitable for y'all. But right after I got that, and I used it some that first year, then the next year is when we went to Sharon Wells. So you really don't have time to embed that into your staff. But since last year when I mentioned doing what we were doing now for basic facts, I kind of got shot down because we need to try to make sure we're using it to. I'm like, well, I understand that, but how do I trust a whole program I don't know to make sure my kids get what they need because I know how to do this with success.
Right.
Yeah.
So then COVID hit, so it wasn't really, I guess, a major issue. But I think us doing this, the countdown to star, like I said, we can change it up to make some that's more for what they're missing. But I think it's also a good review for our kids before they have to take a benchmark, because that way you're getting, every day you're hitting a different type of teak or a different type of problem, and it's refreshing their minds. But so that's their morning work. They work on that. Like today, what they're doing today at home for their Win Wednesday is that work. Like they're working on those particular problems. I told them these are the ones you know how to do. These are the ones I've taught you before. So you need to go ahead and complete these. These words right here haven't been taught. If you want to attempt them, great. And that's what they're doing for their Win Wednesday work. So that way when they come in tomorrow, they can start working on that next days. That way it's completed so they can see what they know and what they don't know.
Sounds good.
Poetry, I also put the TEACS review with star-based questions. The ones that I showed you, they're in my room, so I would have to direct you where they're at since I'm not at school. But the ones that I showed you that were, each TEAC had 3 questions that we could use as like exit tickets or whatever.